Something big just changed in Port Charles, and most fans completely missed it. No one in Port Charles noticed the shift at first. Power rarely announces itself with sirens and speeches. It prefers the hush between heartbeats, the unnoticed signatures on paper, the gentle rearranging of routines. By the time the town realized something had changed, it was already too late to trace when or how it began. Port Charles sat where the river widened into the sea, a working town wrapped in fog and habit. The docks woke before dawn, the cafes before the docks, and City Hall only when it had to. People here trusted what they could see: cranes lifting cargo, lights glowing in office windows, the mayor smiling at ribbon cuttings. Control, everyone assumed, lived in obvious places. That assumption was their first mistake. Mara Klein arrived 3 years earlier with no ceremony, no entourage, no gossip. She rented a narrow brick house on Alder Street, paid in full, and introduced herself to neighbors with baked bread and careful smiles. She said she worked in logistics consulting, a phrase vague enough to bore people into nodding. She attended town meetings but never spoke. When she listened, she took no notes. Most people forgot her name, except Elias Rowe. Elias ran the Port Charles Ledger, the last independent newspaper in town. He noticed patterns because patterns were how stories began. He noticed that Mara always sat near exits, that she left meetings exactly 2 minutes before adjournment, that she asked questions afterward, quiet ones, precise ones, of clerks and custodians rather than officials. Then the small changes started. A zoning variance approved without debate, a dock contract reassigned overnight, a local bank merging with a regional firm no one had heard of. Each event by itself seemed harmless. Together they formed a constellation. Elias mapped it on his office wall, red string looping between names and dates. Every line somehow curved back to companies with bland titles: Northline Holdings, Riverspan Services, Alderway Trust. Their paperwork bore different signatures, but the handwriting slanted the same way. He knew because he'd photocopied them all. When he finally found Mara's name on a document, it wasn't where he expected, not as an owner, not even as an executive. She was listed as a witness. "Witnesses don't run towns," his editor said when Elias brought it up. "Not publicly," Elias replied. The second person to notice the shift was Councilwoman Renee Alvarez, though she didn't realize what it was until it brushed against her. Her campaign donor list began shrinking, not because people withdrew support, but because they no longer needed to give. Projects she'd championed for years suddenly passed without her pushing. Her phone calls were returned before she made them. It felt like being gently moved aside by invisible hands. The third person was Jonah Pike, union foreman at the docks. His men started getting better equipment, safer schedules, and fairer contracts, without strikes, without threats. Management claimed it was new leadership philosophy. Jonah didn't care why, but he did care who. He traced the decision back through 3 layers of subcontractors to a consulting firm, Logistics Consulting. The realization hit Port Charles like a delayed tremor. Mara Klein wasn't buying the town, she was synchronizing it. She understood that power didn't live in titles, it lived in supply chains and compliance deadlines, in who received information first and who waited. She never forced decisions, she arranged conditions so decisions made themselves. When Elias finally confronted her, it was in the quietest place he knew, the public records room. "You're pulling strings," he said, voice low. She didn't deny it. She smiled, just slightly. "Strings imply puppets. I prefer bridges." "Why?" he asked. "Why Port Charles?" Mara considered him for a long moment. "Because it was neglected," she said. "Neglect creates gaps. Gaps invite chaos or design." "And you're the designer?" "I'm the caretaker," she corrected. "I don't run for office. I don't own the docks. I don't tell anyone what to do. I just make sure the right people can do their jobs without obstruction." Elias wanted a villain. He wanted a headline that would shake the town awake. But as he looked around at the repaired roofs, the balanced budgets, the quiet competence spreading like a tide, he hesitated. "Who's accountable?" he asked. Mara met his eyes. She said, "Everyone, including me." When the story ran, it wasn't the exposé Elias had planned. It was a question, printed above the fold. Who is quietly taking control of Port Charles? The town buzzed for weeks. Speculation flared and faded. Some demanded Mara leave. Others invited her to dinner. She continued her routines unchanged, bread cooling on windowsills, meetings attended in silence. And slowly, Port Charles understood the truth beneath the shock. Power hadn't been stolen, it had been reorganized. And the most unsettling part wasn't who held it now, but how little noise it made.